So on this week's episode of Be More Super, the podcast, we are joined by the sponsors of the show. It's the wonderful Propstore. If you don't know who they are, you don't know what you're missing. Check out propstore.com. And also coming up very, very soon on the 21st of June to the 24th of June, they've got another epic auction, and we've got Chuck Costas with us from Propstore. Chuck, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on here. I love to talk about superhero things, so I got some super stuff to show you today.
That is awesome. And you know what? It's just a pity that you're in LA, because every time the London branch have an auction, it's a great excuse to go down there, get up close and personal with all the wonderful things. So this auction coming up on the 21st to the 24th, how many pieces?
Yes.
Because am I right in saying is it 1,800 pieces?
Well, actually, you're not exactly correct, because it's actually over 1,800 pieces.
Wow.
So, but yes, it is a large auction this year. This is our first 4-day auction that we've ever done. Previously, last year, we actually did a 3-day auction, but we added a 4th day. And part of that is part of what we'll be talking about today. We wanted to add some different content into there, including comic books and comic art, because we thought they were very complementary to the original movie props that we're sort of known for. And so part of what we'll talk about today is sort of those perfect pairings of if you're a comic book fan, if you love sort of the movies that star some of those folks, you can build really the ultimate collection for yourself through just this one auction.
Which is a great thing, because it's great to see comics actually being featured as well, because they are as collectible as movie props and costumes, which is awesome. So if you could tell all the viewers and listeners how easy it is to actually take part in this auction.
Yeah, so first, as Brian was saying, check out the catalog of over 1,800 items, and you can do that by going to propstore.com/live auction, and there you'll be able to access the catalog as well as register for the auction. So everybody needs to register for this, and there are different ways of bidding. I think most people that are, especially if you're all over the world and can't be here live in Los Angeles, you'll want to bid online, and you can go ahead and do that. And you can either bid online in advance, you can actually go right now and bid, or you can wait till the final day that those items are being called by the auctioneer, and then you can actually bid online live as well. Other options that we have are telephone bidding. If you are bidding, especially if you're only bidding on a few lots, and you want to sort of go about your day, and you want us to sort of get a hold of you when your lots are coming up, that's the best option. And so that way we call you about 10 lots ahead of time, so that you're sort of staying on top of things, and then we'll walk you through as the bidding progresses and ask you if you'd like to bid. I always prefer that. And then if you are here in Los Angeles, you can actually come down to our Valencia office and be part of the fun that's going to be going on. This is the first time that we've opened it up for live auction bidding in the last 3 years since COVID hit. And then I guess the final way is you can also place absentee bids. And what absentee bids are is essentially you give us the highest bid, but we only advance that bid as high as whatever the I guess underbidder is in that regards. And so the advantage of that, though, is if you bid via absentee, that always trumps some of the live bidding. So if you have $2,000 as your max and somebody else wants to bid $2,000, if you bid at absentee, you're the one that gets that bid. So that's a good way of also sort of strategizing on how to bid.
And the auction itself is going to be broadcasted live, if I'm right in saying, on propstore.com?
That is correct. If you go on the day of the auction, if you go exactly where we're talking about at propstore.com/live auction, you'll see a flashing red light that'll tell you that we're live. And we actually have auctioneers that will be live from here, and they'll be calling each lot in order, starting in 1 and going to 1,800 plus. And then if you're playing along sort of on your computer, you'll be able to hear the auctioneer, but you'll also see it on your screen as to what lot we're on and what the next bid that we're asking for you to bid if you actually want to participate in that one.
And you know what? It is awesome to watch. Me and the wife, we watch it every year. We put it on the big TV, and it's just fantastic to watch, to see these amazing pieces that are so rare go under the hammer. I've got to say, it's fantastic. So let's talk about some of the pieces in question. So the first piece we've got is obviously Michael Keaton, which forever will be my Batman. If you could tell us a bit about the Nike boots from Batman.
You can see those over here. Yeah, these are Nike boots, and I think a lot of people know that Nike participated in Back to the Future. Michael J. Fox's shoes from Back to the Future were Nikes, but did you know that Batman's boots from the 1989 film, as well as the 92 film, were Nikes as well? And it's not so obvious, but there's actually a Nike swoosh that's actually on the side of those boots, as well as the Nike logo that's on the front of that. But obviously de-emphasized, not as visible as those Nikes were in Back to the Future. But they actually switched the type of boot between 89 and 92, and this is actually the first set of boots that we've handled. And I think for those that are collectors of sneakers, and I think that's becoming a huge hobby in and of itself, these are really sort of the ultimate Nikes, especially if you're a Batman fan, to own. And frankly, probably one of the rarer parts of the Batman costume if you're trying to put together a full costume. But I think they actually display really nice if you just wanted to show off the boots, and especially if you are sort of a sneakerhead, as they would say.
And you know what? You learn something new every day about these films through the props, I've got to say. And the estimated on that is $20,000 to $30,000. So fingers crossed, some lucky person is going to bid and win on that one, which I'm sure. And then obviously the piece that will complement that, we've got, is it the hand-drawn Brian Ballard?
Brian Boland, yes. I think especially those in London there should hopefully know Brian Boland. So The Killing Joke, or Batman the Killing Joke, came out in 1988 by Alan Moore and Brian Boland. It was a 40-page story that talked about, or it was sort of the ultimate story of Batman versus Joker. Right after that came out, in France, there's this publication that was called USA Magazine, and they actually wanted to feature Boland and Alan Moore in an article there, and they were actually reprinting in France. They actually didn't print it as one sort of full novel. They actually serialized it and broke it into sections. And so there was, I think the second part of the story was actually in this magazine. But Boland drew a new cover right after he did the original Killing Joke for this magazine, but it was always intended to be drawn or painted by Tonino Liberatore, who was a famous painter known for Ranxerox, known for his work on heavy metal. And so Tonino actually painted the final cover, and you can actually see that up above it. But this is Boland's original piece. And what's interesting about this is, unlike some of the original Killing Joke pages, those are pretty large. This is even larger and extends all the way out to the edges of the paper. So a great image. Boland actually added that the red lips to the Joker, even though it was a black and white piece. It was just an added thing that he added, and it actually looks like a very finished piece. I wish most people have never seen this. The first time it was actually printed was the 20th anniversary, the Killing Joke Deluxe Edition that came out in 2008, and it's really small in the back of that. And I think to see this live and in person, right next to me, you can just see how impressive this piece is. And given that pages from the interiors of the Killing Joke are going for $100,000 plus, there's actually another auction going on this week that you'll actually have some pages from what they call the shrimp part of the story. In that, this is a cover piece. If it was the original U.S. cover that I think everybody knows with the Joker and his camera, nowadays you might be talking a few $1 million at this point in time. I guess we will wait and see to see how the market continues to shake out. But given that there was a comic book page that sold for $3 million, it wouldn't surprise me, given that that's probably the most desirable piece from the 1980s, that would exceed that. So this is the French, I call this the French cover. Again, who knows what this will go for, but we have it estimated at $80,000 to $120,000.
That is awesome. How do you remember all these facts, Chuck? Because you must be literally a robot, because I can't even remember a shopping list, never mind, so this is so impressive. So coming up next, we've got one of my all-time favourite movies, is Superman. We've got the wonderful Knowledge Crystal. I've actually got a crystal of my own that I've had for over 15 years. My wife is trying to get me to sell it, and I'm saying no. It's staying with me for years to come. So if you could tell us a bit about this piece.
Yeah, so as most people probably know, Superman 1 and 2 were filmed back to back. Classic Richard Donner film. The green crystal was the one that started it all. So threw it into the ground, created the Fortress of Solitude, but not as prominent as maybe the white crystals. I know, Brian, I've got a white crystal in my collection, and I think that's an amazing piece as well. But the green crystal is the rarest, and so they had different green crystals for each of the different movies between Superman 1 and 2. This is the one that was used in those movies. I'm not sure how many there were, but frankly, there weren't a lot of it. So I think when you look at the rarity of, if you really want a Superman crystal, I think they're a great thing to collect. They're nice and they've got a great texture to them, and they're just awesome to sort of spin around and look at. This one's a little bit skinnier, and you can sort of see it right here. The white crystals are typically a little bit larger than this one. The knowledge crystal is a little bit thinner. But this is a great piece and reflects really nicely with the light as well. I won't actually touch it there, but just an amazing piece. And from what I also understand, it's rare to. I think this was sold originally by Propstore a number of years ago, and has now come back on the market. But it's a very rare opportunity to actually get your hands on the green crystal from Superman 1 and 2.
And it's such an iconic movie. It really, really is. So to get pieces that were filmed in like the late 70s, I think is awesome. And obviously Superman started the whole superhero sort of franchise, I suppose. So then we've got going with that, a good companion to it would be, if you like.
Well, this is Action Comics number 252, with and I like this one because it's the first appearance of Supergirl, also the first appearance of Metallo in this issue. So you get a 2-for-1 as far as first appearances from Action Comics. And I think this is one of those iconic covers from the 1959. And, Brian, one of these little facts is that and I used to be what they call an ashcan collector, which is when DC Comics used to get the copyright. They actually secured the copyright for Supergirl back in 1944, believe it or not, and waited till 1959 to actually release the character. So they had the idea that they were going to release Supergirl at some point, but they waited 15 years to actually put her out. And so here you have the story of her arriving on Earth and discovering that she's got a cousin and he's Superman, and it takes off from there. So after Action 252, you start seeing Supergirl appear in other issues. But there's just a great cover, and I think it just complements, and putting these on the shelf together doesn't take up a ton of space, but look really great together.
And the great thing is, they only go up in value. I mean, I think Action Comics number 1 sold for a record amount recently as well. So it just shows collecting comics does, do you good, in the long run, if you're doing it from a financial point. So then we're going on to Batgirl, which we're not talking about the latest one, one of the shows from the 60s, which I always loved watching on a Sunday afternoon. I really did. Adam West, Burt Ward, and then obviously with Yvonne Craig as well. I think I've got a picture just here of...
you can see this here. Of Batgirl Gloves, and you can see them right in front of me. So obviously collecting parts of the costume, and I've seen from the 1960s, not as much stuff around. Obviously, they were on a television budget back then, and they did do a few seasons. And she wasn't in the very first season; she came a little bit later into the season. But I think these are great, similar to Batman's costume. It's kind of got that same sheen to it, and the sort of these are a purple color. I think Batman's color was a little bit darker than this to give a little bit of contrast to it. But you see the wear and tear on the gloves. If you actually look at the tips of this, you can actually see, these were well used and well loved. I don't know how many pairs of those they have, but they have their own unique style with the wings coming out from the side that you obviously can recognize these instantly as Batgirl's gloves. They come with some signed photos from Yvonne Craig so that you can put them together. And, Brian, as you mentioned too, they're not from the new one, but if you are a fan of the newer movies, we actually behind me have a Batgirl belt from the 4th Batman movie in the series as well. So if you're trying to put together a Batgirl collection, maybe that's your thing. We actually do have a few things in the auction from it, but I think these gloves from the 60s, that Batman to me was the one that started it all, similar to the Christopher Reeve Superman that really got it started in the movies. This is what kicked off a whole revolution. They actually redeveloped the whole Batman character, even in the comic books when they kicked off the Batman TV show. And I think you'll show on screen, I don't have it here, but the comic book that would go with that is the first appearance of Batgirl from Detective Comics 359. And this is right in the midst of sort of Batmania that was going on in the 60s. So she was introduced in the comics right around the same time she was actually introduced on the television show, which I thought was a great crossover, even back then, of sort of crossover of promotion. And at that point in time, the Batman comic book was one of the most popular comic books that was on the stands. And again, another dynamic classic cover that just stands by itself. And the fact that it's got that purple background color goes really nicely with the fact that these are nice purple gloves. So I think, again, put these on the shelf together, they would look fantastic.
Literally, I'm just thinking now of a nice box frame with the gloves in, with the comic behind it. Definitely. And then we move on to Wonder Woman, which obviously everyone knows, but Linda Carter was the original, and absolutely loved that show as well. I've got here, I think it's her wonderful bracelets, which are iconic.
Yes.
Literally, you recognize them straight away without even knowing what they're from. So if you could tell us a bit about those, please, Chuck.
Yeah, so I think, and I'm going a little bit back, and Brian, you remember more better than I do. But if I remember the first season of Wonder Woman, you were sort of set in the 1940s, and then they sort of moved her more to her present day in later seasons, and they actually changed her costume as well. So in season 1, you actually had her with the silver bracelets. I believe in season 2, you actually moved more to the gold bracelets that she wore there. But they are actually padded on the inside, which is nice for the actor's comfort, so you can sort of see what they've done to try to make them easy to wear, but they're a heavier but pliable metal, so that you could actually cinch them around your wrists there as well. But great pieces. You don't see much from the Wonder Woman. I think obviously the costume is iconic, and again, owning a piece. I think either the bracelets or the tiara or the golden lasso are the things that you want to collect from Wonder Woman, or all three of those things. But again, what I love about them is that they're small. They display very nicely, and you could put them in a shadow box. You could put them on your desk, and I think easy to store, but also just instantly recognizable. And again, if you're a fan of that the early origins before the movies came out, Linda Carter was the Wonder Woman, and I think a lot of people still consider her the ultimate Wonder Woman today. And great to have a piece of that TV show.
And that era of shows is just awesome, and they're just classic. They really, really are. So to get a piece from a show like that is literally a talking point, if that was on display somewhere. And then obviously to go with that, we've got DC Comics Wonder Woman number 300, which I haven't got a photo, unfortunately. So
sure.
And
this may not show the best on screen here, but I'll show this what I can of it right here. So this is there's an artist named Ed Hannigan, and Ed was an artist that worked for both Marvel Comics and DC Comics back in the 70s and 80s. And his, I guess, primary job at the time was to draw cover prelims. And so he would actually be the artist behind the scenes. He didn't get credited for a lot of these things, that would actually sketch out for other artists what the designs of the covers should look like, to basically save them time, and also get the approval from the editors. So Wonder Woman 300 was a landmark issue. It was one of those, anniversary issues that they did. And this one is a tougher one to see. And I think if you go on to propstore.com/live auction to look at the catalog, you'll actually find a whole bunch of other cover prelims by Ed Hannigan. But this I wanted to highlight just because it's a key cover, and it's a double-sized cover. It's a wraparound cover, as they would call it, where there's an image on the front and the back, and you can see all the different characters that he drew into this. But it's great that we've got Ed's work represented in this. Both Wonder Woman, we've got Spider-Man, we've got Batman, we've got a lot of great covers, including the one that's over my head here. But I encourage people to go ahead, and if you're a fan of comic books and sort of understanding how they're created, getting one of these cover prelims. It's going to be a fraction of the cover, the final cover, because nowadays, Brian, as you were saying, the investment of comic book artwork has really skyrocketed in value. And I would say, a lot of great. If this was the final cover to Wonder Woman 300, you're probably looking at least $25,000 for the final cover of this. So for a fraction of that price, you can get one of these great cover prelims, which gives you that insight into the creative process, and really is a key piece that ultimately ended up with that comic book piece. So
that's awesome. And then we move on to Thor, which I am so amazed that you've got the hammer that Chris Hemsworth hasn't taken all of them, because apparently he's got about 6 to 9 hammers at home.
I have heard that he has a hammer collection. I even heard that he was keeping them in his bathrooms or something like that. So probably not the best place to store your props. The water damage that could ensue, we don't know. But yes, we do have one. And what's special about this is from the very first Thor movie. or in the early days of Marvel Studios, there were a couple of auctions that were actually officially sponsored, and the items came from Marvel Studios. This is an item that did come from those. But after really up about the time of the Avengers, Marvel Studios started keeping everything. I think probably the speculation is they were sort of evolving towards this idea of what they were going to do with the multiverse and wanted to keep things in case they went back in time to get that. So that's one of the theories that's out there. But the reality is that Marvel has not officially released much from the movies. Propstore has actually been the auction partner for all the television shows. We've done Marvel's Luke Cage, Marvel's Daredevil, Marvel's the Punisher, name it. We were able to do that, and we were very happy to bring those to fans. But the movie stuff is very rare. So this is a stunt hammer from that very first movie. The design of the handle is actually a little bit different for Thor 1 than it was. They evolved it in Thor 2. They actually added sort of a metal bit down at the bottom and changed the handle a bit. But very detailed for a stunt. And so if you actually look at it, you can see the engravings on the top of it. It looks like Thor's hammer, even though it is made out of a foam-like substance. You wouldn't know that it only weighs 3 pounds, as opposed to that's the hero ones, which I think were probably closer to 8 pounds.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing what that goes for, because again, the Avengers and Marvel, literally, there's so many collectors out there that are obsessed. I know quite a few people that literally will be bidding on that, so it'll be quite entertaining to watch. And then going with that, you've got Avengers #1.
Yeah, I picked this one. There's obviously a lot of different Thor books out there, but I always loved Avengers 1 because it's a book that brings them all together for the first time. As you said, this is really the beginning of the Marvel universe, as we know it, even on screen, was bringing these Avengers together. So this came out in 1963. The superheroes from Marvel started in 1961 with the Fantastic Four, but in 1962 they started bringing out Iron Man and Thor and the Hulk. And so this was the book that they put them all together to sort of compete with the Justice League of America. But why is this? You just get such a big image of Thor on the front cover, and you've got this big looming image of Loki that's coming straight at it, which I think just sort of symbolizes what the Avengers and frankly what Thor is all about. So I think these two would look great together.
And then we talk about the grading of these comics, because obviously people are wanting to get like a 9.0 or a 9.4. But again, comics like these as a 3.5 are still literally quite rare because of what comic it is. So, roughly how much is that going for again?
If I remember correctly, I think it's like $2,500 to $3,500 is the estimate on it. Is that correct? Okay, so my memory is pretty good. But yeah, so I think you actually bring up a very good point, and we'll show in just a moment a really high grade comic. It depends on what you want to buy. I think for display purposes, my preference is to get a really nice, somewhere in the 3 to 4 grade, just because they display nicely, they still look nice, but they do have the flaws. And for me, seeing some of those flaws means, hey, somebody read this back in the day, and it had a life of its own. It was a book, but it's still very displayable. And something in that 3.5 or 4.0 range, it's not going to have big pieces out of it. It still presents very well. All the key things are there that you're looking for, but it does have some spine dings. It does have some wear and tear on it. But again, that shows its origins. Where something that's a 9.8, looks like it came off the newsstand. Those are fantastic, and there's nothing wrong with buying those, and those are great investment grade pieces, but they're going to cost you a lot more. The difference between if you wanted a 9.0 Avengers, I can't remember what it is, but you could be talking something in the 9+ range. You're probably talking 6-figure range versus having one here that's a little bit more affordable in the $2,500 to $3,500 range. So I think it's a great way of thinking. I think you can strategize about it, but at all grades, they're actually a very good investment. I think what you do see is over time, and I can't represent that they will hold their value over time, but I think what we've seen historically, especially with comics, is that they've continued to go up in value. I remember when I was a kid, I think that was a couple $100 to get an Avengers one. It's no longer that. So,
do you ever regret that when you was a kid that you never took these comics and put them in cellophane and kept them safe over the years? Because I had like a Millennial Falcon and all the figures, and looking now on what they could fetch, literally as a kid I should have been thinking to myself, let's keep them in the packets.
Brian, I was one of those kids that as soon as you got the book, I was very careful about reading it and put it in
Were
the next
you?
plastic and put a backboard on it. So I had many a comic book. But when I went through my moving exercises, what I realized is you can't keep all the books. And I think what I've learned over time is having the key books like this to display in my collection is probably where I want to be as a slightly older person in my life, because you can't have everything. You want to display the things that you do have, and you want to display them well. So from that perspective, going after the quote unquote key issues is great. But we also do have some runs of comics. If you actually want to read, sort of, I think we'll have runs of Avengers that are somewhat complete. Or if you want to read Iron Man from Tales of Suspense 39 all the way through, I think we have a complete run all the way up to Iron Man 100 represented in the auction. You can read those early origins in those in the original format. And I think what's great about that is you get to sort of see the progression of ads over the years, and you get to see Stan Lee's soapboxes and all the different things that he was talking about, and the letters from all the writers that from all the different people. And sometimes there's a famous person that's in the back of those comic books. So reading them that way is still pretty cool years later, and it's a bit of a history lesson as well.
Mm. And let's talk Spider-Man, because we've got the Amazing Fantasy number 15. Again,
Yes.
this is an iconic, comic. Literally, this image is all over the place, which I think is awesome. If you could tell us a bit about it.
Yes. So this actually comes from the collection of J.W. Rinsler. J.W. Rinsler was a famous Lucasfilm historian, but also had a comic book collection. And we were lucky to bring some of those pieces, both comic books and comic art that he had in his collection, to folks, as well as some of the actual books that he worked on. But the star piece of his collection was this Amazing Fantasy. And it's a graded 1.0, and it's actually restored. And what that means is somebody actually, in this case, they took a pen to little parts of it and tried to touch up the color on it. And you can sort of see that in the Amazing Fantasy logo, where somebody took a little bit of a brown, either marker or colored pencil, and tried to just make it a little less obvious that the line is there. But in my opinion, it's restoration. I'm always wary of restoration, but in this particular case, with this particular book, it's actually a very presentable looking copy. There is a corner missing out of the bottom. The staples are detached from it, but outside of that, it presents really well. And as you said, this is, if you had to own one Silver Age book, I think most people would say the first appearance of Spider-Man Amazing Fantasy 15 is the book. And this would just look, fantastic again on the shelf. Everybody recognizes it. It's a good example at about the lowest price you're going to ever be able to find. And it's the best looking 1.0 I've ever seen. So if you're looking for a quote unquote budget copy, I think we have this estimated at $8,000 to $12,000. I think there was a copy that did sell in the millions, that was, and I think it was a 9.6 was the highest graded copy. And I believe it sold a couple times. I think a few years ago it was 900,000. I think now it was over 2 million. That same copy sort of changed hands. So if you don't want to spend $2 million on a copy and just want to have one in your collection, this is just a great opportunity. It's very rare to find a low grade copy that looks so good. So keep your eyes on this one.
And how would you recommend storing these comics? In the cases, are they protected, or would you recommend them being put away, away from sunlight, etc.?
Yeah, I don't think they're protected from sunlight. So you never want to put these things in direct sunlight. They do have a plexiglass barrier on them, which probably does help with keeping some of the sunlight out. But the cases are not necessarily meant to preserve it. It's not like there's an inert gas inside of it that you have to worry that will actually protect it from deteriorating over time. But what I would suggest is, if you want to display it on a shelf, but keep light off of it. They do make holders that actually stand them upright, which is similar to the ones that I've got behind here. That's a great way of displaying it. Or if you just have some type of way of displaying, almost like a book, you could put it in a little rack that just stand it upright. And I think just displaying it next to whatever you'd like to display it with, presents really nicely on the shelf. Or you can put it in a box, and keep it out of the sunlight if you really want to do it that way too.
Oh no, you've got to have it on display somewhere dark.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, in your man cave, and then to go with that, which would look perfect next to it, is the Green Goblin.
The pumpkin, the Green Goblin, and I will light it up there because I don't think you get the full appreciation for it until you can actually see it lit. So I'll show it on camera for everybody with this, just so you can sort of see it. But it goes through an actual sequence here where before it gets activated. So this is I've seen static versions of this. This is the first hero version that lights up that I've ever seen, and this just is an amazing piece of workmanship because it blinks, all the lights work on it, and it's got this great metallic paint job on the front of it. It actually feels very heavy, feels like you could throw it at Spider-Man and it will explode at some point in time. But from the very first Spider-Man, I think some people like different movies better. I think everybody agrees that first Spider-Man sort of kicked things off in the right way and is a classic in its own right. So just an amazing piece that we haven't had the pleasure of having one of these, at least in recent years. But I think again, this would be going great with the Amazing Fantasy. You could also get the first appearance of the Green Goblin, which is Amazing Spider-Man number 14. We've got one of those in the auction as well. Both would look great paired together.
And then we talk about the Punisher, which is one of my favorite characters. Literally, I've had Thomas Jane on the show, and I absolutely loved the film. The series, apparently there's rumours that, I don't know if it's confirmed, that it's been picked up again for another season, the one with John Berthel.
John Berthel,
yeah, so I cannot wait for that. So we've got a great comic here, which is the Amazing Spider-Man, which is if I'm right in saying, the first appearance of the Punisher.
It is, yes. So Spider-Man 129 was the very first appearance of the Punisher, also the first appearance of the Jackal that came into that. He sort of started as it was obviously, I guess, a villain that was attacking Spider-Man, but always introduced in a way that you weren't quite sure if he was a hero or a villain. He was sort of a confused individual that was fighting Spider-Man because the Jackal had sort of put him up to it. But I think there's 12 pages in the story where he actually makes his appearance. So a good long appearance of the Punisher in there. And what's interesting on this particular copy is this is dated October 3rd, 1973. If you look really closely, you'll see what they call a date stamp that's on this copy, which I think is also historically important. You notice if you look in the upper corner, it actually says February 1974. So this is it shows you just how far in advance they would release it. And the reason they did that is there was a signal that in February they should actually take this off the newsstand, so they would know. They'd put the cover date on there, but they'd actually release it much sooner to give it a little bit of a chance to actually be on the newsstand for somebody to buy it. And I think here you've got that in this comic book. You actually have that, the date it hit the stands sort of captured on the book, and it's about as high grade as you can get. It's a 9.6. Typically 9.8 is the highest, although technically there is a 10.0. I don't know if there's any out there on the census. So this is a very, very high grade copy of the first appearance of Spider-Man, of the Punisher. And if you watch the movie Coyote Ugly, you'll know that that's sort of the focal point of the movie is this comic book. And so it must be great.
Definitely. And then we've got to go with that, which is this awesome piece.
Yes. So original art, again, very hard to come by. And for whatever reason, pages from that original first Punisher story, extremely hard to come by. And nowadays, for most first appearance books, you're talking six figures for any page. Wow. This page is... this is from now in the UK, and you may be more familiar with it being over in the UK. This is how the first appearance of Spider-Man looked. It was in Super Spider-Man number 178, which was the UK reprint of this. And they and I can open this up here and show you some of the pages, but they actually printed this book. It's sort of sideways, at least the cover was, but on the inside they actually put the pages. I'll actually show it this way. They actually reprinted in black and white while the U.S. edition was color, but they actually printed it up two per page. But when they got to actually doing the splash page, which they actually, to introduce the story, they put that on the inside cover and wanted to have one long image that was the same dimensions as the others. So they actually designed this page here to actually go on the inside cover of that book. And so it's the same image that you would see on the very first page of the Punisher story that worked on Spider-Man 129 to repencil it. And then another inker, Mike Esposito, actually inked it. But it's the same image, it's just it's stretched sideways. And so again, if this was the US version of this, I'd hate to see what this would go. It would be somewhere in the at least mid six figures for the first appearance of Spider-Man splash page. Here we're estimating this one to be $40,000 to $60,000 because it's the UK version of it, but still a great piece if you're a Punisher fan. It's that first appearance story of the Punisher, and just a great image of him from that very, very first scene where we see him in the comic books.
That's awesome. And then moving on to because I'm just looking at time. We could be chatting
Oh, sure.
for hours for this. Wolverine, good old
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman. The claws, which I think are
Yes.
awesome. This is my dream item. It really is, because to display these would be absolutely awesome.
Yeah, they display well. You don't have to do too much to do that. These are from X2. There are different ones from different movies. What's special about these is that on the bottom, you'll actually see that HJ has been stamped on these, which you don't see on many of these. And the origins of these actually came from the stunt coordinator that was working with Hugh Jackman on the X2 film. And I guess it was typical for them to put tape on there for protection. But what also is interesting too, and we got stories of this from people that worked on production, is it was very common that Hugh Jackman would actually, or anybody that was working on the film, they would break the knuckles on this. So Hugh would put them into his hands like this, and then if you hit anything with these claws or flexed his knuckles, there was a tendency for these edges to break off. And so we had heard stories of sort of piles of these claws that sort of got tossed to the side. This is a pair that survived that has the broken knuckle, but that also shows the wear that, it was actually used on set as well, which is actually very cool to part of the backstory of the origins. And the other thing about these too is that these are the sort of hard resin versions of the claws. My understanding is on X2 as well, the stunt coordinator actually got hurt, because these things actually are very pointy. They do not bend necessarily when you poke somebody with these. And he actually got hurt on set. So my understanding is after that, they actually started making some floppier sort of stunt versions of these claws just to make sure that it was safe on set for the Wolverine claws.
Oh, and what are they going to go for? Like roughly the.
Let me look that up.
Actually, I think I've got it here. Actually, $10,000 to $15,000, which
that sounds about right.
To be honest, for what they are, I think it's great. I mean, obviously, anything could happen on the day. We could have a bidding war.
Yeah.
So who knows? And then I wanted to talk about the Day Walker sword, the from Blade, which is another great piece. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is actually I got to call it the spikes on the handle actually are retractable, and they will actually pop out of that. I'm not quite sure how somebody was holding that sword, their hand didn't get taken off when that happened. So interesting design on that one, but this is a hero metal version of the sword. And again, to pair with that, we've got the first appearance of Blade from Tomb of Dracula number 10 as well that goes with it. So very rare. Blade, I think, the first movie from Blade is the one that probably people love the most. And I think it's great to have. The Daywalker sword was obviously in multiple films, but having one from the very first Blade and a hero version of that, which is made out of metal, is a very special thing as well. So glad to have that one in this auction.
And again, awesome film. And again, it's quite rare to find these pieces. I mean, where do you find these pieces from? Because with over 1,800 items, literally, you've been so busy. I mean, are the items from fellow collectors? Are they from the studios? Or is it a mix?
It is definitely a mix of all those things. So some items will come directly from the studios. For instance, we have coming from Paramount Television Studios. We've got items from The Offer, which is a show that was here in the States that just premiered about the telling of the making of The Godfather. But sometimes I'd say a lot of times we get them directly from people that worked on the sets or worked on those films. A lot of times, especially in the 80s or 90s, after the film was over, they basically asked people, or they did a sale on the lot and said, who wants this stuff? And so a lot of people kept it, and sometimes it's in their garage or storage locker. And then sometimes it has ended up in collectors' hands and has been cared for, especially things like Gremlins puppets that we have here. It's great to see that they've been kept in such amazing condition, and that's because collectors have loved and cared for them over the years as well. So different sources, it comes, we're always amazed. We start the year not knowing what's going to walk in the door. But by the end of the year, this year, especially more so than any, we were just amazed at the quality of the content that has shown up, because, some of this stuff, like the X-Wing, which we're not talking about right now, that piece, nobody knew it actually existed. And there was always a hope that something like that existed. But until this year, we hadn't confirmed that an actual screen matched X-Wing fighter existed out in the world. And now we have one to offer to fans out there. So a very special auction.
I had the honour of looking and not holding, thankfully, the X-wing that was auctioned off at the last auction in London, and you don't realise the quality that they actually, the workmanship that goes into these props, which is great. I mean, every year we see a piece or a few pieces that break records for Propstore. I mean, from your opinion, is there a standout piece that you think is going to break all the records?
I mean, I do think that this X-wing, this screen match X-wing, has the chance of breaking all the records. We have it estimated at $500,000 to $1 million. But given that it is probably one of the most desirable things that you could even sort of dream up that still exists from one of those Star Wars movies. And it's the only one that is known, especially out in private hands. There are pieces of X-wings from other pyro models that exploded on set, and that's what they were meant to do. They were meant to be blown up. So the fact that one exists that was used in a particular scene that has some wear and tear on it, I just don't think you're going to see another one of those. So I think when you have a unique item like that, and from the most desirable film, the sky could be the limit on that. So we will see.
And personally,
but there'll be other, as you say too, Brian. There'll be some other surprises throughout the day, and I think that's the great thing of watching the auction live, is that you never know what somebody could really love. We have the natural bat, for instance, which is screen matched. Never seen one of those, and the fact that it's screen matched. A lot of baseball lovers out there, a lot of people that love that film. That one could be also another sort of big surprise for a lot of folks.
And what is your personal favorite out of the auction this year?
My personal favorites, I love Back to the Future, and I love the fact that we have 2 hoverboards in the auction this year. They're not necessarily behind me here, but we have a Marty hoverboard, which we did sell last year, and that did sell. That sort of went a little crazy at about $500,000 is what that sold for. But we also have the Pitbull, which was Griff's board, and it's a wooden version of that. We've never actually handled one of those before, and it's an amazing one. So, frankly, I'd be very happy owning one of those. I probably will not. I think somebody else will end up taking those home after our auction. But I think those are just, the fact that we've got this amazing quality across multiple films and television shows, just some great variety of things. And, just even the comic book artwork here that we've got, these are great as well. There's some great pieces I wouldn't mind owning myself.
So the auction is the 21st of June to the 24th. Propstore.com. Get on there, get registered, and enjoy the auction. Chuck, you've been a great guest. It's been lovely to chat with you, to chat about some of the pieces, and I'll be watching live, and if I can convince my wife, I'll be bidding as well. So thank you so much, and good luck with the auction.
Thank you very much. Good luck to all of you.